Simone Carter was 33 years old when she slid under the honeymoon suite bed to find a missing earring, only seconds before the door opened again. It was the same bed she'd picked out herself, in the room she'd paid for herself, on the wedding night she'd waited her whole life for. Andre walked in laughing. He wasn't alone. The woman with him wasn't a stranger passing through. She was someone from Simone's own industry, someone who'd sat quietly at a back table all evening, watching. Simone heard her husband's voice, low and certain, saying she'd never notice anything, too busy counting money to see what was right in front of her. She heard the woman laugh and answer that Simone's money wouldn't be a problem much longer. Above her, on the mattress she'd chosen, they moved like people who believed they'd already won. Simone didn't make a sound. She just listened and remembered everything. What happened next would cost them both far more than they could imagine. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The payment confirmation read, Transaction complete. Honeymoon suite. Clearwater Vineyard Estate. $1,847. Simone stared at it for a moment. Then she closed the app, set her phone face down on the vanity table, and didn't think about it again. Today was not a day for numbers. She looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was ivory with thin shoulder straps and a row of small pearl buttons running down the back. She'd found it at a sample sale 8 months ago and kept it wrapped in plastic in the back of her closet, terrified to try it on again in case something had changed. Nothing had changed. It fit her like it had been made for her, draping cleanly over her hips, the fabric catching the early morning light that came through the tall windows of the bridal suite. Outside, the vineyard stretched in every direction. Long rows of dark green vines, rolling hills going soft and gold at the edges where the sun was still climbing. The air smelled like earth and something sweet she couldn't name. It was a beautiful place to get married. She had paid the deposit herself. Andre had said he would handle it. Then 3 weeks passed and she checked, and the estate had no record of a deposit, and the date was about to be given to someone else. So she handled it. She didn't make a big deal out of it. She simply gave them her card number and moved on. That was the kind of woman Simone was. She saw a problem and she fixed it. She didn't need credit for it. She just needed it done. Renee arrived at 8 with a garment bag over one shoulder, a tray of coffees in her hand, and more energy than anyone had a right to have before 9 in the morning. "Don't cry yet," she said, pushing through the door with her hip. "I mean it, Simone. I just finished your makeup consultation notes, and I will not redo them." Simone laughed. It was a real laugh, loose and easy. "I'm not crying. You have that look. I'm just standing here. That's the look." Renee set the coffees down and unzipped the garment bag with careful hands. She'd been planning events for 6 years, and she handled everything. The florist timeline, the catering drop-off windows, the ceremony program layout, with the same precise care she was giving to that zipper right now. She was the kind of friend who showed up, not just today, always. She turned and looked at Simone properly. Her eyes went wide, then soft. "Oh," she said, "just that." Simone smiled. "Don't. I'm not doing anything." Renee pressed her lips together. "I'm being completely professional." She crossed the room and straightened the back of Simone's dress without being asked, smoothing the fabric between her fingers. "He's lucky," Renee said quietly. Simone looked out the window at the vines. "I know," she said, and she meant it. She really did. The rehearsal dinner the night before had been warm and easy. The long table lit with candles, wine moving freely between friends. Andre had been charming all evening, laughing loud, touching her hand, telling the story of how they met with just enough exaggeration to make it funny. But there was a moment. Loretta, Andre's mother, had been mid-toast when someone at the far end of the table, one of Andre's cousins, called out a name. Simone hadn't caught it clearly over the noise, something like B, or a name that started that way. Loretta's smile didn't disappear, it just went still, like a photograph of a smile rather than the real thing. Her eyes moved to Andre fast, just for a second, and Andre's jaw shifted slightly, a small tightening, before he picked up his wineglass and redirected the table's attention with an easy joke. Nobody else seemed to notice. Simone filed it away the way she filed most things, quietly, without comment. Andre's phone stayed face down on the gift table all day. She noticed it twice, once during the cocktail hour, once later when she walked past it to greet his aunt. She didn't ask about it. It wasn't something she could explain as suspicious, exactly. It was just a small, still thing that sat at the edge of her awareness, like a stone in a shoe she'd decided to ignore for the day. There was also the gift. Small, square box, ivory ribbon, no card. She'd asked Renee about it during the reception. "No idea," Renee said, turning it over. "It was just sitting with the others when we did the table sweep. Could have fallen off." Could have. Simone left it with the others. The reception wound down the way good parties do. Slowly, reluctantly, guests drifting toward the exits in pairs. The band played a last song. Someone's child fell asleep under the gift table. It was nearly 10 when Simone reached up and felt only one earring. Her grandmother's. The borrowed one. Small gold loop, worn thin at the curve, irreplaceable. She retraced her steps in her head. The honeymoon suite. She'd stopped there briefly before the ceremony to leave her bag. She'd been wearing both earrings then. She was almost sure of it. Andre was across the lawn still, talking with 3 of his groomsmen, jacket off, at ease. "I'll be right back," she said to no one in particular, and she walked back toward the suite alone. The honeymoon suite smelled like flowers and candle wax. Simone pushed open the door and let it fall shut behind her. The room was dim. Someone had lit the candles on the dresser earlier in the evening, and they'd burned down to small, stubby flames that threw soft shadows across the walls. The bed was turned down, rose petals on the white duvet, a bottle of champagne in a silver bucket, still sweating. She hadn't asked for any of it. Renee had arranged it. That was Renee, filling in the beautiful details. Simone stepped out of her heels and left them by the door. The floor was cool hardwood under her feet. She moved to the near side of the bed, crouching carefully so the dress wouldn't pull, and ran her fingers along the baseboard. Nothing. She moved to the foot of the bed. Still nothing. She lowered herself further, pressing her cheek almost to the floor to see underneath. There. A faint glint, maybe 2 feet in, near the center. She stretched her arm under but couldn't reach. She'd have to go around. She was on her knees on the far side of the bed, dress spread around her, fingers just brushing the earring's edge, when she heard them. Voices in the hall, low, getting closer. Then the door handle turned. She didn't decide to hide. Her body just did it. One fluid movement. She pressed herself flat and slid beneath the bed frame, pulling the edge of her dress in after her, just as the door swung open and the light from the hallway cut across the floor. She stopped breathing. His laugh came first. She knew it before he even spoke. That loose, easy sound he made when he was comfortable, when he thought no one was watching. "Told you the room was clear," Andre said. The door clicked shut. 2 sets of footsteps, one heavier, one light. "You sure?" A woman's voice, lower than Simone expected, unhurried. "The toast already happened. Nobody's coming up here." A pause. The sound of the champagne bucket being moved across the dresser, then ice shifting. "Nice room," the woman said. There was a smile in it. "She picked it." Andre again, easy as anything. "She picks everything." The woman laughed softly. "I know." Simone lay still on the cold floor, her cheek against the hard wood, her grandmother's earring 2 inches from her face. She did not move. The footsteps came closer. She watched 2 pairs of shoes pass by the side of the bed, his dress shoes, the brown Oxfords she'd helped him pick out in March, and hers, strappy heeled sandals, gold, moving alongside his without any hesitation. The mattress above her shifted with weight. "She has no idea you're here?" the woman asked. "She never does." Andre's voice was relaxed, almost amused. "She's too busy counting money to notice anything." The woman laughed. A real laugh, not polite, like he'd told a joke she'd been waiting for. Then she said it. Her money was never going to be a problem for long anyway. Simone's fingers curled against the floor. She forced herself not to move, not to breathe too loud, not to make a single sound. She pressed her lips together and stared at the dark underside of the bed frame above her, and she listened, and she filed every word away in the same quiet, precise place she put everything that mattered. His voice, her voice, the exact words, the ease of them, the way neither of them lowered their voices because it never occurred to them they needed to. The perfume reached her then, something expensive, warm and floral with an edge of something darker underneath, specific enough that she would know it again anywhere. The mattress shifted again. The champagne cork came out with a dull pop. There was a murmur, too low to make out, and then the kind of silence that wasn't empty at all. Simone closed her eyes. She didn't know how much time passed. Long enough. Too long. Then a knock, hard and sharp, rattled the door. The silence broke apart instantly. "Just a second," Andre's voice, tight now, nothing like it had been a moment before. "Andre?" Renee, loud and clear through the door. "Simone? The caterers need you guys for the final toast. Simone? Are you in there?" Movement above her, urgent and clumsy, the mattress lurching, a heel hitting the floor, then the other, the rustle of fabric, fast. "Give me 1 second," Andre called out, louder. "I'm coming in." Renee's voice, a key in the lock, more scrambling. The terrace door on the far side of the room opened with a soft click and then shut. The strappy gold sandals were gone. The main door opened. Renee's footsteps came in. "Andre, where's Simone? The caterers have been waiting for 10—" "She's not here," Andre said, smooth now, recovered. "I thought she'd be back by now. Try the garden." "Okay." A pause. "Have you been up here this whole time?" "Just grabbed the champagne early. Wanted it ready." "Okay, well, come on." Footsteps, 2 sets, heading out. The door clicked shut. The room went quiet. Simone lay under the bed in her wedding dress and did not move. Simone stayed under the bed for another full minute after the door closed. She counted the seconds. Old habit. When the world moved too fast, she slowed it down. Counted. Measured. Let the numbers hold her steady. At 60, she moved. She slid out from beneath the frame slowly, the silk of her dress whispering against the hard wood. She sat up on the floor first, then pushed herself to the edge of the mattress and sat there with her hands in her lap. The rose petals were still on the duvet. The champagne was open, 2 glasses poured. She looked at the 2 glasses for a long moment. Then she reached down and picked up her grandmother's earring from the floor, held it in her palm, closed her fingers around it. The candles had burned even lower. The room was almost dark. She sat in the quiet and let herself feel it, all of it, the full weight of what she'd just heard, for exactly as long as she was going to allow herself to feel it tonight. She gave it that. She gave herself that. Then she stood up, smoothed the front of her dress, and walked to the mirror above the dresser. She put the earring back in, fixed the small curl that had come loose near her temple, pressed her lips together, and looked at the woman looking back at her. She looked fine. She looked composed. Nobody would see a thing. Andre came back 40 minutes later. He opened the door with that easy energy he carried everywhere, jacket off, tie loosened, like a man who'd had a perfect night. "There you are," he said. "Renee said you were looking for your earring." "Found it." She held up her hand so he could see it in her ear. "Good." He crossed the room and kissed her cheek. His cologne was the same as it had been that morning. His hands were relaxed. He went to the champagne, saw the 2 poured glasses, and smiled like he was pleased with himself. "Renee must have done this. Nice." "Crazy night," he said, handing her a glass. "Cleanup took forever. Catering was a whole thing." He settled onto the foot of the bed, rolling his shoulders. "Worth it, though. It was a great night, right?" "It was a beautiful wedding," Simone said. She looked at him, really looked at him. The line of his jaw, the way his eyes moved around the room without landing on anything for too long. The ease of him, the total, complete ease. She used to think that ease meant safety. She used to think it meant she could rest. "Come here," he said, reaching for her hand. She sat beside him, let him hold her hand. She noted the weight of his fingers, the temperature of his palm, the sound of him exhaling, slow and satisfied, like a man who had everything he wanted. She said nothing. He fell asleep before midnight. Simone lay still beside him in the dark until his breathing settled into the long, deep rhythm she'd learned over 2 years. Then she got up without a sound, took her phone from her clutch, and went to the small writing desk by the window. She opened a new note, typed the date, the time, 11:58 p.m. Then she typed everything she remembered, his voice, her voice, his exact words. She's too busy counting money to notice anything. Her words. Her money was never going to be a problem for long anyway. 2 pours from the champagne bottle, gold, strappy sandals, her perfume, warm, floral, something darker underneath. Expensive. She exited through the terrace door, east side, when Renee knocked. He told Renee he'd just grabbed the champagne early. She read it back once, added the time Renee's knock came, added the direction of the terrace. Then she opened her messages and found Theo's name. Need to meet. Just us. Not urgent, but soon. Don't say anything to anyone. She hit send. Set the phone face down on the desk. In the morning, she told Andre about the work emergency over coffee. Fraud flag, she said. One of the quarterly files. I have to go in. She made a face, apologetic, tired. I'm so sorry. I've been putting off this review for a week already. Andre looked at her over his cup. Something moved behind his eyes. Then he settled back and gave her the understanding smile, the one that said, I married a workaholic and I accept this. We'll reschedule, he said. Bali will still be there. I'll make it up to you. He waved it off. It's fine, Simone. She nodded, wrapped both hands around her mug. She found the balcony before 5 a.m, when the sky was still dark and the vineyard below was just shapes and shadow. The air was cool and smelled like damp earth and the last of the night-blooming jasmine along the trellis. She stood at the railing and held her own elbows. There would be no scene, no plate thrown, no voice raised in a hotel hallway. She would not cry in front of him. She would not give him the face he would remember. She would give him something else entirely. Not your rage, she told herself. Your patience. Give him the consequence of your patience. She would go home. She would look at every account, every transfer, every document his name had ever touched. She would know everything before he knew she knew anything. The lanterns along the path had been switched off. The flower arrangements near the terrace entrance had already been broken down, the white roses packed into boxes by the catering crew. The long reception tables were bare and pushed to one side. All that elegance, stripped back to just wood and stone and flat gray morning light. Simone stood near the window of the suite while Andre moved around behind her, zipping his garment bag, humming something low and shapeless under his breath. You packed your cufflinks? She asked. Yep. The tie Theo gave you? Got it. He came up behind her and kissed the side of her neck. You're doing that thing, he said. What thing? The checklist thing? He smiled against her ear. Even on checkout day. She turned and gave him a small smile. Habit. He squeezed her shoulder and went back to his bag. She watched his reflection in the glass. He slept well, she thought. He slept like a man with nothing to hide. Renee was already in the small breakfast room off the main hall when they came down, a cup of coffee in one hand and her thick event binder open on the table in front of her. She had the look she always had after a big event, capable and slightly frayed at the edges, still running on adrenaline and not enough sleep. There they are, Renee said. She pointed at Simone. You look entirely too good for someone who was supposed to be leaving for Bali this morning. Work, Andre said easily, pulling out a chair. You know how she is. I do. Renee handed Simone a coffee cup. Fraud doesn't care about your honeymoon. It really doesn't, Simone said. She sat down, wrapped her hands around the cup, Listen to Andre and Renee fall into easy conversation about the reception, who danced the longest, which table ran out of the short ribs first, whether the lighting on the east terrace had been too dim. She let the conversation move around her and kept her breathing even. Then Renee said it. "Oh, I meant to tell you last night, but it kept slipping my mind." She flipped a page in her binder. "One of the catering guys flagged something weird. A late towel request came in for the honeymoon suite. Like, late, after 11. She shook her head. "I have no idea who even would have... But it came in under a guest name. Bianca Reyes. She was at table 7, the industry friends group. Andre, didn't you say she was someone from a conference?" Andre reached for the breadbasket. "Yeah, we crossed paths at that wealth management summit last spring. Mutual contacts." He shrugged. "She's fine. Probably just didn't know which number to call." "Probably," Renee said, scribbling a note in the margin. "I'll just flag it with the estate manager so it doesn't hit us as an unexplained charge." "Sure," Andre said. Simone picked up her coffee cup. Her face did not change, but her mind moved, fast and clean, the way it always did when numbers stopped adding up. Bianca Reyes. She turned the name over once. Then she had it. Table 7. She had glanced over at that table twice during the reception, she remembered now. Once during the toasts, once when the band shifted into something slower. A woman in a deep green dress, dark hair pulled up, the kind of posture that said she was used to walking into rooms and being noticed. She had raised her glass during the toast to the bride and groom with the rest of the table, smiled, looked straight ahead, straight at Andre. Simone had registered the look and let it go, told herself it was nothing. Now she filed it differently. And she knew the name. She knew it the way you know names in your industry. Not a close contact, not someone she'd worked with directly, but someone whose firm had come up in professional circles. A rising associate at a boutique wealth management firm. Smart from what she'd heard. Ambitious. The kind of woman who understood exactly how an accounting firm worked, what its equity looked like, what a senior partner's stake was worth. She knew. That was the thing. Bianca Reyes had not wandered into this. She had sat at table 7 at Simone's wedding in a green dress and raised a glass, knowing everything. The coffee was hot. Simone drank it carefully. "Actually," she said, when there was a pause in the conversation. Renee looked up. "Can you pull together the final vendor records from yesterday? Guest list, too." She kept her voice mild, easy, the voice she used when she was asking for a file that didn't mean anything special. "I want to keep them for our records." Renee blinked. "Like, all of it? Contracts, timesheets, the whole packet?" "Whatever you have. No rush. This week is fine." "Sure," Renee said. She wrote it down. "I'll put it together." "Thank you." Andre looked over at her, one eyebrow slightly raised. "What?" Simone said. He laughed. "Nothing. Just very you." "Just very me," she agreed. She picked up her coffee again and looked out the window at the bare tables and the packed-up roses, her expression smooth and unreadable. The condo was quiet in the way that only feels comfortable when you've earned it. Simone had bought it 3 years ago. She'd picked the floors herself, wide plank white oak, the kind that cost more than she told anyone. She'd chosen the kitchen counters, the light fixtures, the deep charcoal paint on the accent wall behind the couch. Every corner of the place had her fingerprints on it, financially and literally. Andre had moved in 8 months ago. He'd brought his clothes, his basketball shoes lined up by the door, and a framed photo of himself at some business summit that he'd hung in the hallway without asking. She'd let it stay. Now she sat at the desk in the second bedroom, her office, not the one Andre called our space, with a glass of water at her elbow and her laptop open. His car had backed out of the driveway 40 minutes ago. Another meeting. He didn't say with who. He never said with who. He had pushed for the joint accounts before the wedding. Not hard, just steadily. The way he pushed for most things. A suggestion at first, then a warm reminder, then a casual assumption that they'd agreed. It just makes sense for a married couple, see? Simplifies everything. She had moved a portion of her bonus into the account, a reasonable amount, enough to cover their shared expenses, the way you did when you were building something together with someone you trusted. She opened the account portal now. The login credentials were hers. She had set them up. Andre had never bothered to ask for his own access, another thing she had filed away without fully examining until now. She pulled up the transaction history and started at the beginning. The work was familiar. It was the same thing she did every day for clients, pulling threads, following the path that money left behind, the way it always left a trail, even when someone tried hard to erase it. Money was not subtle. Money had a memory. She found the first transfer in 11 months ago. Small, neat, labeled Household, MISC. She found the second one 3 weeks later. By the time she reached the 6th transfer, she had pulled up a separate tab and started building a spreadsheet. Her fingers moved without rushing. The transfers were regular, but not perfectly spaced. Careful enough to avoid a pattern a casual eye would catch, not careful enough to avoid hers. They landed in the joint account briefly and then moved again, out to a second account, a number she didn't recognize, in increments that corresponded, nearly exactly, to the rent cycle of a mid-range apartment in the east side of the city. She cross-referenced the amounts with her own deposit history. Her chest tightened. 3 of the transfers, totaling just over $4,000, had cleared within a week of her quarterly bonus hitting the account. Not her primary account. The joint one. The one Andre had suggested she use, just for convenience. She kept her breathing steady. She kept her eyes on the screen. She pulled up public property and lease records, tools she used for fraud investigations every month, and ran the account routing number against available data. It took her less than 20 minutes to find what she was looking for. A shared lease, 12 months, 2 names on the application: Andre D. Carter, Bianca M. Reyes. Simone sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, the white oak floors, the light fixture she had picked herself, the life she had built, corner by corner, with her own hands and her own money. Then she looked back at the screen. She kept going. The car payment appeared in month 9, a down payment of $3,200 paid from the same secondary account on a vehicle registered to Bianca Reyes. She found the vacation next. 2 hotel charges in a coastal resort town last July, the same weekend Andre had told Simone he was in Atlanta for a business development conference. She had not questioned it. She had made dinner for herself that Saturday and worked on a client report. What struck her was not the amount. She had seen larger thefts. She had unraveled much more complicated fraud. What struck her was Bianca's spending pattern. It was unguarded, easy. The purchases moved the way a person's spending moves when they are not worried about the source of the money. No hesitation in the amounts. No gaps or pauses that might suggest someone checking, second-guessing, wondering where it came from. Bianca Reyes had received every transfer, made every purchase, and spent like a woman who understood the arrangement completely and had no concerns about it at all. She had not been misled. She had not been kept in the dark. She had simply spent the money and never asked a single question, because she already knew the answers. Simone opened her external hard drive, a small black one she kept in the locked drawer of her desk, and began saving. Every statement, every transfer log, every routing number, lease record, and hotel receipt. She built the folder in silence, labeled it cleanly, and when the last file confirmed, she ejected the drive and set it next to her water glass. Then she picked up her phone and called Theo. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" "I need you to come here," she said. "In person. I have to tell you some things, and I need you to hear all of it." A pause. "I am on my way." Loretta Carter lived in a neat brick house on a quiet street in Decatur, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was edged and every porch had a hanging basket of flowers. The house was warm-colored, well-kept. It looked exactly like the woman who lived inside it. Simone pulled into the driveway on a Tuesday afternoon with a canvas bag on the passenger seat, 2 candles, a box of good tea, a handwritten note on cream cardstock. Thank you gifts. Thoughtful ones, the kind a new daughter-in-law would bring. She had chosen them carefully. She rang the bell. Loretta opened the door in a floral blouse, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, and her face arranged into the warm, full smile she deployed for company. "Simone, baby, come in, come in." The house smelled like cinnamon and something baking. The living room had fresh flowers on the side table and a church program folded on the armrest of the couch. Everything in its place. Everything pleasant. Loretta made tea without being asked. Simone sat at the kitchen table and set the canvas bag between them. "I just wanted to drop these by in person," she said. "You did so much to help pull the wedding together. Andre told me how much you handled on the back end." Loretta waved a hand. "Oh, that was nothing. That was family." She set 2 mugs down and settled into the chair across from Simone, folding her hands around her cup. "You looked absolutely beautiful, by the way. That dress." "Thank you," Simone smiled. "It was a good night." It really was. Simone let a moment pass. She turned her mug slowly in her hands. "It went by so fast, though. I barely remember the end of the reception. I was so tired by the time we got to the suite." "That's how it always goes," Loretta nodded. "You blink and it's over." Andre disappeared for a little while, toward the end. Simone kept her voice light, almost absent. "Did you see where he went? I was trying to find him for the last toast." Something crossed Loretta's face. It was small, and it was fast, and if Simone had not spent 11 years reading the things people tried not to show, she might have missed it. "He was probably just, you know how he is," Loretta said. "Socializing. He gets caught up talking." Simone nodded slowly. "Right." She let it sit. Then, gently, "I did notice he seemed a little distracted during the reception. Is there anything going on with him? I just want to make sure we're starting this out on solid ground, you know?" Loretta's hands tightened around her mug. A small adjustment. Almost nothing. "Andre is fine," she said. "He loves you. He's got a lot going on with his business, and sometimes that weighs on him. You know how men are. They carry things quietly." "He does carry things quietly," Simone agreed. Another pause. "I just want to support him," Simone said. "But I can only do that if I understand what's actually going on." Loretta looked at her tea. Then she said in a careful voice, "You know, Simone, every marriage has its adjustments. The important thing is keeping the peace. Not every little thing needs to be turned into a whole situation." Keeping the peace. The phrase landed clean and precise, like a key sliding into a lock. Simone watched Loretta's eyes stay fixed on her cup, not quite meeting hers. The woman's posture was careful, measured. This was not someone choosing her words because she didn't know the answer. This was someone choosing her words because she knew too much of it. "You're right," Simone said softly. "The peace is important." Loretta looked up and smiled, relieved, clearly believing the conversation had turned a corner. "Exactly. You two are going to be just fine. You're steady, Simone. That's a rare thing. Andre needs that. He needs someone like you." Someone like you. Not he loves you. Not you're good for each other. Someone like you. Steady, reliable, useful. A stabilizing feature in a life that required managing. Simone picked up her mug and took a calm sip. "That means a lot," she said. "Thank you." They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing that mattered: a cousin's graduation, a church fundraiser, whether the weather would hold through the weekend. Simone laughed at the right moments. She refilled her own tea when offered. She hugged Loretta at the door and said she would see her soon. She walked to her car. She set her hands on the wheel and sat still for a moment, looking at the brick house through the windshield. The hanging basket of flowers, the edged lawn, everything in its place. She pulled out of the driveway and drove. When she was 2 miles down the road, she called Theo. "Hey," he answered. "Tomorrow," she said. "Bring your notes on the firm's ownership structure. All of it." A pause. Then, steady. "I'll have everything." She ended the call and kept driving. Theo's office was on the 4th floor of a building in Midtown, the kind of place that smelled like printer paper and old wood. Framed diplomas lined one wall. The other wall was floor-to-ceiling shelves, packed with binders and case files in careful order. He was standing at the window when Simone arrived, already waiting. She set her laptop bag on the conference table without a word and pulled out a folder. Then a second one. Then a small external drive. Theo turned around and looked at the table. He looked at her face. "All right," he said quietly. "Show me everything." So she did. She started with the night itself, the exact time, the exact words, her handwritten notes made in the dark. She told him what she heard Andre say. She told him what she heard Bianca say. She laid it out the way she would present findings to a client. No emotion, no editorializing. Facts in order. Theo listened without interrupting. He didn't wince. He didn't reach out to touch her hand. He just listened, the way she needed him to. Then she opened the laptop and walked him through the financial records. The joint account Andre had pushed to open 6 weeks before the wedding, framed as practical and what married couples do. The transfers she'd traced. The pattern that built itself, month over month, into something undeniable. Rent, a vacation in March, a car payment in May, her own bonus deposit from last November, moved in 3 pieces so no single transfer would look significant. 12 months, she said, at minimum. Theo studied the screen. His jaw was set. "And Bianca Reyes works at Holloway Wealth Partners," Simone continued. "Mid-level associate. She's in the same professional circle I'm in. She knew exactly who I was. She knew where the money was coming from." She paused. She cashed the checks anyway. Theo leaned back. "And Loretta?" Simone told him about the visit, about keeping the peace, about someone like you, and the small, careful way Loretta had chosen every word, like a woman navigating around a hole in the floor she'd known was there for months. Theo was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's been asking you to add him to the firm." "Every few weeks," Simone said. "He frames it like he's ready to contribute, like it's the next step." "It's not the next step." Theo opened his own folder and slid a page across the table, a clean breakdown of their father's firm, the ownership structure, the signatory chain. "If he gets his name on that firm as a co-signatory with full access, he controls how capital moves. He doesn't need to own it. He just needs the access." He tapped the page. "That's the prize, Simone. That's what this whole year was building toward." She looked at the document. She had known it, somewhere underneath everything, but hearing Theo say it plainly made it settle differently, heavier and cleaner at the same time. "So we give it to him," she said. Theo looked at her. "We give him exactly what he asked for," she said. "Paperwork that looks like what he wants, but the signing rights get routed into a revocable trust. My name on the trust. My control." She kept her voice even. "He signs what he thinks is access. It's actually a cage." Theo held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up a pen. "I'll have the documents drafted by Friday." They worked for another hour. Theo drafted the trust framework. Simone reviewed every clause, marked 2 corrections, and signed off. It looked exactly like the arrangement Andre had been nudging toward for months. It gave him nothing. When they finished, Simone closed the laptop and turned to a second matter. Bianca Reyes's firm, Holloway Wealth Partners, maintained a professional ethics board with an external review process. Simone knew one of the board members, a former colleague named Deirdre Walsh, careful and principled, someone who took documentation seriously. Simone did not file a complaint about an affair. She filed a documented concern: undisclosed outside income, a pattern of financial transfers from a client-adjacent relationship that Bianca had never reported to her compliance department. She attached 3 months of records, clean, time-stamped, traceable, enough to open a door. The message to Deirdre was 3 sentences long: professional, factual. She sent it from her work address. By mid-afternoon, Renee had emailed over the finalized vendor records from the estate: check-in logs, towel requests, a time-stamped entry from the terrace side door that matched the window of the night exactly. Bianca Reyes's name appeared twice in the venue system, once at check-in, once on a late-night request logged at 11:47 p.m. Simone printed the records and added them to the folder. She sat back and looked at the table. Everything was in order. She picked up her phone and opened her calendar app. She typed out a dinner invitation. Her home, Saturday evening. Andre's name first, then Loretta's, then Theo's. Then she typed Bianca Reyes. She did not explain why Bianca was included. Andre would handle that himself. She already knew he would. He would tell Bianca it was a business dinner, some opportunity he had arranged, believing he was the one pulling the strings. She hit send to all 4. Then she set her phone face down on the table, exactly the way Andre always did, and looked out the window. Simone had set the table herself that morning, not because she needed to. She had time, and she wanted it done right. She laid the good plates, the ones still in their original box from a housewarming gift 2 years ago, never opened, white with a thin gold rim. She ironed the linen napkins. She centered the low floral arrangement Renee had dropped off without asking why it was needed on a random Saturday in November. The apartment smelled like roasted garlic and thyme by 4 o'clock, something warm and unhurried, the kind of smell that made people feel safe before they even sat down. That was the point. Andre arrived home from the gym at 5, showered, and came out of the bedroom, adjusting his collar with a satisfied look on his face. The look of a man who believed the evening was his idea. "You sure we need Theo here?" he said, glancing at the extra place setting. "He's family," Simone said simply, carrying a serving dish to the table. Andre shrugged. Let it go. He was in a good mood, the kind of good mood that comes from a man who thinks things are falling into place. He'd spent the last 3 days telling Simone how mature it was that she wanted to host a dinner, how good it would be for everyone to come together. He'd said "come together" twice. She'd counted. He didn't ask about Bianca until guests were 20 minutes out. "Hey," he said, half casual, setting his phone face down on the kitchen counter. "So Bianca's coming tonight." Simone looked up from the stove. "Mm-hmm. I may have mentioned this dinner to her." He smiled the smooth smile, the one he used when he was adjusting a story mid-sentence. "She's been looking into some business contacts, and I thought, with your firm background—" "That's fine," Simone said. He blinked. He'd expected more resistance, or at least a question. "Okay," he said. "Good. Great." He picked up his phone and walked back to the living room. Simone turned back to the stove. Loretta arrived first, in a burgundy wrap dress, carrying a bottle of wine she handed over with both hands and a wide smile. The kind of smile that worked hard. "Everything looks beautiful, baby," she said, looking around the apartment. "You really have a gift." "Thank you, Loretta." Simone took the wine and kissed her cheek. Warm, easy, like nothing had shifted at all. Loretta's eyes traveled to the table, the folder sitting neatly beside Simone's placemat. She looked at it for just a half-second too long before looking away. Theo arrived next. He set his coat over the back of a chair, nodded at Andre, and poured himself a glass of water. He didn't make small talk. He didn't need to. He sat at his place and was simply, quietly present, a fixed point in a room where everything else was about to move. Bianca came last. She knocked twice, and Andre opened the door before Simone could cross the room. "Bianca," he said warmly. The name landed in the air like something practiced. Bianca stepped inside, and her eyes moved immediately to Simone. Not nervous exactly, but careful. She was polished in a deep green dress, hair pulled back, the kind of woman who knew how to compose herself for any room. She extended her hand. "Simone, thank you for having me." Her voice was smooth. "Your home is stunning." "Glad you could make it," Simone said. She shook the hand, held it for exactly 1 second, smiled. "Come in." Dinner was pleasant. That was the word for it. Pleasant. The food was good. The wine was poured. Andre held the conversation the way he always did, filling silences with easy charm, talking about a commercial real estate contact he was this close to closing something with. Loretta laughed at the right moments. Bianca asked thoughtful questions and nodded at Simone's answers about the firm, performing professional interest cleanly. Theo ate and said little. Simone refilled glasses and passed the bread and smiled at the right moments, and inside her chest, everything was perfectly still. When the plates were cleared and the table held only wine glasses and the low flicker of the candle centerpiece, Simone stood, walked to her place at the head of the table, and sat back down. She picked up the folder. She set it open in the center of the table. "I want to walk through something," she said. Her voice was even, almost conversational. "While everyone's here." She turned the first page toward the table, a printed bank statement, then a second, then a third, each one dated, each one marked with highlighted line items in yellow. "Joint account, opened March 14th, she said. 14 months of transfers. I've traced each one." She walked through them without rushing. Rent payments to an address in West Midtown, a resort charge in March, a dealership transaction in May, her own bonus deposit from November, moved in 3 separate transfers over 11 days. "Andre," she said his name like a notation. "These moved through your access credentials." Andre's jaw shifted. He glanced at the papers, then back at her. He made a short sound, half laugh, half exhale, and leaned back in his chair. "Simone, come on. That's business. Some of that is business expenses I was managing." "Managed to whose account?" Theo said quietly. Just the one question. Then silence again. Bianca had gone very still. Her wine glass was in her hand, but she hadn't raised it in 2 minutes. Her eyes were on the papers. Loretta's hands were in her lap. She was looking at the tablecloth. Simone let the silence sit for a moment. Then she folded her hands on the table and looked at Andre directly. "I know about all of it," she said. "The money, Bianca, the night of our wedding." She paused. "I know because I was under the bed." She watched his face change. "I heard everything," she said. "Both of you." She looked at Andre first, then at Bianca. "She'll never know," Simone said. Her voice was completely flat. "She's too busy counting money to notice anything." She let that land. Then she turned to Bianca. "And you said, and I want to make sure I get this right, that my money was never going to be a problem for long." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Andre didn't move. He sat with one hand on the table and his mouth slightly open, like a man who had prepared for 100 versions of this conversation and gotten none of them right. The smooth smile was gone. In its place was something raw, a kind of recalibrating happening behind his eyes, fast and desperate. Bianca set her wine glass down, very carefully, like the table might crack. Simone let them sit in it for a full 5 seconds. She counted. Then she reached back into the folder. "The firm paperwork," she said. She pulled out a stapled document and set it on the table, sliding it toward Andre. "The signatory agreement you asked me to sign last month? The one you said would help you hit the ground running?" Andre looked at it. His brow came together. "You signed it," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I did," Simone said. "What you're looking at now is what I actually signed." She tapped the top page. "Theo drafted it. Every right you believed you were getting. Access to the firm, signing authority, any claim to what my father built. It was routed into a revocable trust." She reached over and picked up a single sheet from beside her placemat. "This dissolves it." She signed it where Theo had already marked the line, slow, deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. "Done," she said. Andre stared at the paper. Something crossed his face that he couldn't pull back in time, a flash of real, unguarded panic. Not heartbreak, not shame. Panic. The kind that lives in a man who just watched the only door out of a room seal shut. "The condo," Simone continued, her voice still level, still almost conversational, "is in my name. Solely. It was never in yours, and it never will be." She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a fact she was reading off a page. "You have 30 days. Andre opened his mouth. "Andre." Theo's voice was quiet. "Don't." Just that. Andre closed his mouth. Simone turned her head toward Loretta. Loretta had been very still for the last several minutes, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed somewhere between the tablecloth and the candle flame, anywhere that wasn't a face. "You knew about Bianca," Simone said, not a question. "For months." Loretta's chin lifted slightly. "Simone, families go through things. I was trying to keep the peace." "You helped him arrange alibis," Simone said. "I know which weekends. I know which stories you confirmed. You decided that my stability was worth more to your family than my dignity." She paused. "And you sat across from me at that rehearsal dinner and told me how happy you were to have me as a daughter." Loretta's mouth worked for a moment. She looked at Theo. Theo said nothing. He didn't look away from her, and he didn't offer her anything. Not a flinch, not an out, not even the small mercy of looking uncomfortable. He simply looked at her, steady and still, until she looked back down at the table. That silence was its own verdict. Simone let it hold for a moment. Then she turned to Bianca. Bianca had been watching everything with her hands flat on her knees and her jaw set in the particular way of someone trying to calculate in real time. When Simone's eyes landed on her, she straightened. "I understand why you're upset," Bianca said. Her voice was measured, careful. "But what happened between me and Andre? I want to be clear that was separate from anything professional. That was personal. I kept those things completely." "The rent payments weren't personal?" Simone said. Bianca paused. "The car wasn't personal. The resort in March?" Simone tilted her head slightly. "You knew where that money came from, Bianca. You work in wealth management. You know how to read a transaction." She let that sit for exactly one breath. "And you cashed the checks." Bianca's composure held, but something underneath it shifted, the faintest tightening around her eyes. "I want to make sure you have the full picture," Simone said, calm as still water. "Your firm's ethics board opened a formal review this morning. Undisclosed outside income. A client-adjacent relationship with an undeclared financial interest." She folded her hands. "Your name is attached to a paper trail that I documented, that I submitted. The board will do what the board does. I didn't have to editorialize. The facts were enough." The color left Bianca's face in a slow, visible drain. She reached for her phone before she was even fully standing. She pushed back from the table without a word, not a goodbye, not a parting glance at Andre, and walked out of the dining room, her heels sharp against the floor, the front door closing behind her with a quiet, final click. The candle flickered in the draft. Andre was still sitting. He looked at the dissolved trust document. He looked at the chair where Bianca had been. He looked at his hands. Loretta gathered her coat from the back of her chair without making eye contact with anyone. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She pressed her lips together, stood and walked to the door, and then she was gone too. Andre sat alone at the table. The good plates, the gold rims, the linen napkins. He sat in all of it and said nothing. 6 months later, the sign on the door still made her stop. Whitfield Advisory Group, Wealth Council for Women. It was clean black lettering on frosted glass. Simple, no flourish, just the name her father had given her and the work she had built around it. Every time Simone walked through that door, she let herself stand there for exactly 1 second and read it. Then she went inside and got to work. The new office sat on the 4th floor of a building in Midtown, 3 times the size of her old space. Natural light came through wide windows in the conference room, the one Renee had personally styled with low shelving, warm lamps, and a round table instead of a rectangular one. Her idea. "No one feels safe at a rectangular table when they're already scared," Renee had said, dragging a fabric swatch across the desk for approval. She had been right. Today that room held 4 women. Simone could see them through the glass partition as she passed. A new client intake group, all referred through the same domestic financial recovery network Simone had quietly helped build over the last 2 months. One woman was writing notes. Another had her hands pressed flat on the table, like she needed to feel something solid. Renee sat at the curve of the round table with a printed agenda and a coffee thermos, talking with her hands, leaning in, making the room smaller in the best possible way. Simone didn't interrupt. She kept walking. Her own office was at the end of the hall. Theo's was across from it, smaller than hers, which he pretended to complain about every other Tuesday. His door was open. She could hear him on the phone, his voice measured and unhurried, the way it always was when he was explaining something to someone who had underestimated their options. She set her bag down and opened her laptop. The morning moved the way mornings did now. Steady, full, purposeful. Word had gotten back to her about Andre in pieces, the way news like that always traveled, through mutual contacts, through a forwarded email Theo had flagged, through the simple math of a man with no firm access, no condo, and no wife. He was renting a room from a college friend in the suburbs. The entrepreneur chapter had apparently gone quiet. She didn't look for details, and she didn't need to. The facts were ordinary enough to be their own punishment. He had built his whole plan on access to things that were never truly his, and when the access was gone, there was nothing left underneath it. Just a man in a rented room, right back where he started. Loretta had withdrawn. Not dramatically. She had simply stopped calling, stopped appearing, stopped making herself visible in any of the circles she and Simone had once shared. Theo had gotten one text from her 3 months ago, a short, careful message that said nothing and apologized for nothing, and he had not responded. There was no falling out. There was no confrontation. There was just the silence that comes after someone realizes the bridge they burned was the one they needed. Bianca had left her firm in February, before the ethics review concluded and before anything became fully public, but after enough of the internal process had moved that the quiet exit was, itself, a statement. In an industry built on trust and disclosure, reputation traveled in whispers. The whispers had traveled. Simone had not spread them herself. She hadn't needed to. The paper trail she submitted had been factual, documented, and thorough. The rest was the industry doing what it did. She hadn't thought about Bianca in weeks. That, too, felt like justice. Not the burning kind, but the clean kind. The kind that simply removed something from the room. By 7 that evening, the office had emptied. Renee had left with her event binders tucked under one arm, calling back something about a vendor meeting Thursday. Theo had knocked on Simone's doorframe at 6:30, said, "Go home at a reasonable hour," and left when she smiled at him without agreeing. She stayed another 40 minutes, finishing a report. When she finally stood and reached for her coat, the long camel one she had bought herself the December before the wedding, back when she thought she was dressing for someone else's approval, she slipped her hand into the pocket on instinct, feeling for her keys. Her fingers found something else first. Small, round, a familiar weight and a familiar shape. She pulled it out and held it under the desk lamp. Her grandmother's earring. The gold one. The small, smooth hoop she had worn as her something borrowed and lost on her wedding night, in a room she had crawled out of on her hands and knees. It sat in the center of her palm. She stood there for a long moment, not crying, not smiling, just holding it, turning it once under the light, feeling the solid, quiet fact of it. She had torn that estate room apart looking for it. She had checked every surface, every coat, every bag in the weeks that followed. And here it had been, in the pocket of her own coat, all along, waiting for her to come back to herself. She closed her fingers around it. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!